The Grand Ascendancy Hall was the heart of the Irican Empire. It was a room so vast that the ceiling was lost in a soft, glowing mist. The walls were made of a living crystal that pulsed with a gentle light, like a slow heartbeat. Beings from 1,000 different worlds filled the space. Their bodies were of every shape and size. Some had shimmering scales, others had smooth skin in colors of deep blue or vibrant purple. Some had many arms, and others had wings that flickered with light. The air hummed with the sound of their quiet conversations, a mix of clicks, whistles, and deep rumbling words. They were all here for one reason: the crownstone. It sat in the very center of the hall on a raised dais of polished black stone. The crownstone was not a crown anyone could wear. It was a large, smooth gray rock, seemingly plain, but everyone knew it was the most important object in the galaxy. It was the last remaining artifact of the progenitors, the ancient beings who had first brought order to the stars. Next to the crownstone was a tall, delicate-looking device made of a clear, sparkling crystal. This was the soul thread detector. Its purpose was simple: to find the one person whose blood and spirit were a match for the crownstone. The true heir. The Empire had been without an emperor for a long time. A group of powerful nobles, the Regency Council, had been ruling. But everyone knew the Empire was unstable. Without a true heir on the throne, the great noble families were always on the edge of fighting each other. Today was meant to end that. Every royal contender from every great family would be tested. The detector would find the heir and peace would return. Chancellor Kale stood near the dais. He was an Irican, a tall being with green scales and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was the head of the Regency Council. He watched the proceedings with a calm face, but inside, he was sure of how this would end. He knew the detector would not find a match. It had not found one in generations. This ceremony was just a formality. After it was over, the Regency Council would have the excuse it needed to rule forever. One by one, the great nobles approached the detector. First was Lord Tayson. He was from the northern systems, a massive being with thick gray skin like rock. His steps were heavy and shook the floor. He placed his huge 3-fingered hand on the crystal spire. The detector glowed with a soft blue light. A symbol appeared in the air above it, the universal symbol for no match. Lord Tayson grunted, not surprised, and walked back to his place. His large shoulders slumped in disappointment. Next was Lady Sora. She was graceful, with large iridescent wings that folded behind her back. Her skin was the color of a pearl. She floated more than walked to the dais. She placed her delicate hand on the crystal. Again the soft blue glow. Again the no-match symbol. A sad look passed over her beautiful face, and she returned to the crowd. The ceremony continued. A prince named Deho, young and hopeful, was one of the last. He had kind eyes and a nervous energy. He walked quickly to the detector, his hand trembling slightly as he touched it. The blue light appeared. The symbol for no match flashed. Prince Deho's shoulders dropped, and he walked away, trying to hide his deep disappointment. Chancellor Kale allowed a small, quiet sigh to escape. It was over. Every royal contender had been tested. No heir had been found. Now he could give his speech about the continued strength of the Regency Council. He stepped forward to address the silent crowd, but the detector was not silent. A low hum began to emanate from the crystal spire. The soft blue light it had shone for every contender had not faded. Instead, it grew brighter. The device was still active. The crowd, which had begun to relax, suddenly became still again. Every eye turned back to the dais. The tip of the crystal spire, which had been pointing straight up, began to move. It was slow and deliberate. It turned away from the empty space before it and rotated towards the side of the grand hall. It pointed towards the shadowed galleries far from the bright lights of the main floor. These galleries were for visitors, for minor officials, for those who were not part of the great Irican families. In one of these galleries stood 2 humans. The man was named June. He was a xenoarchaeologist, a scientist who studied ancient alien cultures. He was there with a small delegation from Earth. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. They were seen as young, primitive, and mostly unimportant. June was fascinated by the Irican Empire and especially by the progenitors. To see this ceremony was a dream for him. The woman next to him was named Yuna. She was an exobiologist who studied alien life forms. She watched the ceremony with a sharp scientific curiosity. She was taking mental notes on the biology of the different species in the room. When the detector stopped on their gallery, June felt a cold shock. He looked to his left and right, but there was no one else near them. The crystal spire was pointing directly at him. "What is it doing?" June whispered to Yuna, his voice tight with confusion. "I don't know," Yuna whispered back, her eyes wide. "Maybe it's malfunctioning." A deep voice cut through the silent hall. It was Chancellor Kale. His green scales seemed to darken with displeasure. He was staring right at them. "You," his voice boomed, echoing off the crystal walls. "Human in the gallery. Approach the dais." June's heart hammered against his ribs. This was not good. Humans were barely tolerated. To interrupt a sacred ceremony was a serious offense. He looked at Yuna. Her face was pale, but she gave him a small, encouraging nod. Two large Irikan guards in polished armor were already moving toward the gallery. June had no choice. He walked out of the gallery and down the long, winding staircase that led to the main floor. The walk felt like it took a lifetime. He could feel the stares of 1,000 alien beings. He heard their murmurs of shock and anger. To them, a human was like an animal being led into their most holy place. He finally reached the black dais. The crownstone looked much bigger up close. The soul thread detector hummed louder now, its light a steady, demanding blue. Chancellor Kale looked down at him. "Place your hand on the detector," he commanded. There was no kindness in his voice, only cold order. "This is a mistake," June said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I am not one of you. The device has chosen to test you. You will comply," Kyle said, his tone leaving no room for argument. June looked at the crystal spire. It was beautiful and terrifying. He took a deep, shaky breath. He raised his hand. His human hand, with its 5 fingers, looked small and plain compared to the alien hands that had touched the device before. He pressed his palm against the cool, smooth surface of the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. The hall was utterly silent. June felt a wave of relief. It was a malfunction. It was over. Then the world turned to gold. The soft blue light of the detector vanished. In its place, a brilliant, blinding golden light erupted from the spire. It was so bright that June had to close his eyes. The light filled the entire hall, washing over the stunned faces of the crowd in a wave of pure, radiant energy. The low hum became a powerful, resonant chord that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. The light faded slightly, and the detector was now a pillar of solid, shimmering gold. It was frozen, locked in place. Strange, ancient symbols scrolled across its surface at a dizzying speed. Then the symbols stopped. They resolved into a simple, clear message in the language of the progenitors. The hall's translation system automatically spoke the words for all to hear, in a voice that was both soft and absolute. Crownless kin. Resonance. True heir. The silence in the hall broke. It was not a quiet murmur now. It was a roar of disbelief, of outrage, of sheer shock. Shouts of "impossible" and blasphemy echoed through the vast space. Lord Tayson was roaring, his gray face flushed with dark color. Lady Sora had her hands over her mouth, her wings trembling. Chancellor Kale stared at June, his green scales pale. His plan, his power, his entire understanding of the universe had just been shattered by this. This human. June stood frozen, his hands still on the crystal. He understood the words, but his mind could not accept them. True heir? Him? It was impossible. The Irikan guards, looking confused and angry, stepped forward and grabbed his arms, pulling him away from the dais. He was not being treated like a new emperor. He was being treated like a criminal. As he was dragged away, he looked back, searching for Yuna in the gallery. He found her. She was standing, her hands gripping the railing, her face a mask of shock, but also of a new, fierce determination. He was not alone in this. But what had just happened? And what would happen next? The golden light faded, but the silence that followed was even more deafening. June stood on the black dais, his hand still tingling from the contact with the crystal. The words "crownless kin," "resonance true heir" seemed to hang in the air, echoing in the minds of everyone present. He looked at his own hand, a simple human hand, as if it belonged to a stranger. The roar of the crowd returned not as a cheer but as a wave of angry confusion. The sound was a physical force pushing against him. He saw 100 different kinds of faces, all twisted in disbelief. A large being with rocky skin was shouting, his thick finger pointing accusingly at June. A graceful woman with shimmering wings had her hands clasped over her mouth, her large eyes wide with horror. Chancellor Kale was the first to move. His green scales had lost their luster, looking pale and dull. He took a step forward, his movement stiff. He looked from the frozen golden detector to June and then back again. His mind, usually so sharp and calculating, was scrambling for an explanation. This is a malfunction, Kale announced, his voice struggling to find its usual authority. The device is ancient. It has finally failed. But the detector, glowing with a steady, unwavering gold, seemed to disagree. From the gallery, Yuna watched, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. One moment she was an observer, a scientist taking notes. The next, her friend was at the center of a galactic storm. She saw the way the guards looked at June, not with respect but with suspicion and fear. She knew enough about politics to understand that being declared a king you were never supposed to be was more dangerous than being declared a criminal. Down on the main floor, the guards hesitated. They had orders to remove anyone who disrupted the ceremony, but technically the human had not disrupted it. He had completed it in the most shocking way possible. They looked to Chancellor Kale for a command. Take him, Kale finally said, his voice low and tight. Take him to the Spire of Reflection. We must investigate this anomaly. The guards, two large Eurekans in silver armor, gripped June's arms firmly. Their hold was not gentle. He was not an emperor to them. He was a problem. As they led him away from the dais, the crowd parted, creating a path. June felt the weight of their stares. It was like walking through a forest of hostile, unblinking eyes. He kept his own eyes forward, afraid that if he looked at anyone, he would see the hatred and confusion that filled the hall. He was led out of the Grand Ascendancy Hall through a side passage. The grand public spaces gave way to plain, smooth corridors. The silence here was deep and uncomfortable, broken only by the heavy steps of the guards and the soft rustle of their armor. They did not take him to a prison cell. Instead, they brought him to a suite of rooms high in one of the palace's tallest towers. The Spire of Reflection. It was a place for important guests, but also for political prisoners who were too important to throw in a dungeon. The room was circular, with a wide window that showed a breathtaking view of the Irakan capital city, with its crystalline spires and floating transport ships. The door hissed shut behind him, and he heard the distinct sound of a lock engaging. He was a guest and he was a prisoner. Alone, June finally let out a shaky breath. He walked to the window and placed his hands on the cool, transparent material. The city below was vast and beautiful, a testament to an empire that had lasted for millennia. And somehow, according to a machine older than his entire civilization, he was supposed to rule it. The idea was so ridiculous he almost laughed. He was June, a xenoarchaeologist from a small city on Earth. He spent his days digging in dirt and studying broken pieces of pottery. He was not a king. Meanwhile, Yuna was not idle. The human delegation was in an uproar, their diplomats panicking about a galactic incident. But Yuna was a scientist. Her first instinct was not to panic, but to understand. She used her research access codes, which were supposed to be for studying Irakan plant life, to get into the public historical archives. She searched for any information about the soul thread detector. The official records were clear. It measured a soul thread, a unique resonance found in the blood and spirit of the progenitor's direct bloodline. It had never been wrong. She then searched for the term crownless kin. The results were sparse, almost as if the term had been erased from common knowledge. She found only fragments in very old, dusty digital archives. It was mentioned in a few ancient poems and one historical scroll. The scroll described the progenitors not just as builders, but as gardeners of life. Before they vanished, they seeded thousands of worlds with the potential for intelligence. One line caught her eye. And to their first and most beloved children, they gave not a crown, but a seed. They are the kin who wear no crown, but in whom the song of the first one still sleeps. Yuna leaned back from her screen, her mind racing. A seed. Not a direct bloodline, but a potential. What if the true heir wasn't a single person? What if it was a trait? A potential that could exist in an entire species? What if humanity was that species? The crownless kin. The idea was terrifying and huge. Back in the Spire of Reflection, June's door hissed open. Chancellor Kale entered alone. He had regained his composure. His scales were their normal green color again, and his face was a mask of calm control. The detector does not lie, Kale said, without any greeting. He stood by the door, keeping his distance. It has never failed in all of recorded history. So you will explain this? I can't, June replied, turning from the window. I have no explanation. My people are from Earth. We have our own history. We have fossils. We have a record of our own evolution. We only discovered our first progenitor ruin a little over 100 years ago. We are new to this. Kale studied him, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The progenitors left us their technology, their laws, their empire. But they left no clear heir. Only the detector can find one. It reads something that is passed down from parent to child, a thread, a resonance. How can a human, from a world on the far edge of known space, possess this resonance? June just shook his head. He had no answer. Kale walked slowly around the room. There are two possibilities, he said. One, you are, through some impossible twist of fate, the true heir. The heir to the largest empire the galaxy has ever known. He paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. Or two, the detector has finally broken, and your presence here has caused a catastrophic failure in our most sacred artifact. He stopped and looked directly at June. The first possibility is one that the great houses will never accept. They would rather burn the empire to the ground than bow to a human. The second possibility is an act of profound desecration. For that, the punishment would be severe. June understood the unspoken message. He was in a trap. If he was the heir, he was a threat to the powerful. If he was not, he was a blasphemer who had broken their most important relic. Either way, he was in terrible danger. Then what do you want from me? June asked. The truth, Kale said. I need to understand what happened. Until I do, you will remain here. Kale turned and left, the door locking behind him once more. June was alone again with the impossible view. He was a prisoner in a golden cage, declared the master of a house that wanted to destroy him. And the only person who might be able to help him was Una, somewhere out in that vast alien city, searching for an answer that defied all logic. The silence in the spire of reflection was heavy and complete. June sat on a bench, staring at his hands. They were just hands. They had held digging tools and data pads. They had never held a scepter. The words crownless kin repeated in his mind. What did it mean? Kin to whom? He felt more alone than he ever had in his life. Down in the city below, Una was working. She had found a small, quiet terminal in the human delegation's quarters. The other humans were arguing about politics and safety protocols, but she ignored them. She was a scientist with a puzzle. The phrase crownless kin was her only clue. She searched deeper into the Irican archives, bypassing simple filters. She was not looking for official history anymore. She was looking for myths, for old stories, for anything that was not part of the standard teaching. In a forgotten database of pre-imperial lore, she found a story. It was written in an old form of the progenitor language, and the translation was rough. The story described the progenitors not as cold emperors, but as creators. They traveled the young galaxy and found it empty. So they began to plant the seeds of life on countless worlds. They did not make copies of themselves. They designed each new species to be unique, to grow and find its own path. But the story said they had a favorite. Their first successful garden, a world they called the Cradle. They poured their greatest hope into this world. They did not give the beings of this world a crown or a throne. Instead, they gave them a gift. The story called it the Sleeping Song, a potential for greatness that would lie dormant for ages, waiting for the right time to awaken. The cradle was not named, but Una felt a cold certainty in her heart. She pulled up a star chart. She compared the described location from the old story to the known galaxy. The vague coordinates from the ancient text pointed directly to a single yellow star, Earth's sun. Her theory was no longer just a guess. It was taking shape. The progenitors had not left a single bloodline. They had left a legacy inside an entire species. Humanity was not the direct child of the progenitors. They were their masterpiece. The crownless kin meant they were family to the creators, but they were never meant to rule the other children. They were meant to be something else. The detector did not find a king. It found the lost masterpiece of its makers. She had to tell June. Getting to him, however, was impossible. The spire of reflection was guarded and off-limits. She needed help. She thought of Prince Deho, the young noble who had looked so disappointed when the detector rejected him. He had seemed kind. It was a risk, but she had no other options. She used the public network to find a contact address for his household. She sent a simple message. I am Yuna, the human scientist. I believe I know why the detector chose my friend. I need to speak with him. Can you help? She did not expect a quick reply, but only an hour later a message appeared on her screen. It was from Prince Deho. Meet me in the Garden of Whispering Stones. Come alone. The garden was a peaceful place with tall, thin stones that made soft musical sounds when the wind passed through them. Prince Deho was waiting for her. He looked young and serious. Why would you help us? Yuna asked directly. Deho looked at the singing stones. I wanted to be the heir because I thought I could help the Empire. I thought I could make it more fair. But the detector said no. Now it says yes to a human. That is strange. But if the detector is never wrong, then there must be a reason. I am curious about the reason. Curiosity is not a crime. Yuna explained her theory. She told him about the old story and the sleeping song placed inside humanity. She called it latent potential. She explained that June was not a king but a key that had unlocked the progenitor's true plan. Deho listened quietly. His face was hard to read. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. That is a dangerous idea, he said finally. It means the great houses are not the true heirs to anything. It means a human is more connected to our founders than we are. They will not like that. I know, Yuna said. But it is the truth. June needs to know. He is sitting in that tower, confused and scared. He needs to understand what he is. Deho nodded slowly. I can get you to him. The guards at the spire know me. I can say I am bringing a scientist to question the human, but you will only have a short time. Meanwhile, June was visited by someone else, Lord Tyson, the large gray-skinned noble from the northern systems. The door opened and the huge man filled the doorway. He walked in and stood before June, his arms crossed. He looked June up and down with clear disgust. This is a joke, Lord Tyson said, his voice a low rumble. A bad joke. You are a creature from a dirt world. You have no history, no honor. How dare you stand where true royals have stood? June said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Chancellor is a fool for keeping you alive, Tyson continued. He thinks there is a mystery to solve. I see no mystery. I see a broken machine and a lying animal. If the great houses had any courage, we would throw you out the airlock and be done with it. He leaned in close, his breath hot. Know this, human. If Kale's way fails, my way will prevail. And my way does not involve keeping you in a comfortable room. He turned and left, slamming the heavy door shut. June felt a chill. Lord Tyson was not a man of subtle politics. He was a man of action and violence. A few hours later, the door opened again. June expected it to be Kale or another angry noble, but it was Prince Deho, and behind him was Yuna. Yuna, June said, his heart leaping with relief. We don't have much time, Deho said, staying by the door to watch for guards. Talk quickly. Yuna hurried to June's side. I think I figured it out, June. It's not about you. Not just you. She quickly explained everything. The progenitors as gardeners. The cradle. The sleeping song of potential placed inside all of humanity. So I'm not the heir? June asked, confused. Not in the way they think, Yuna said. You are not the son of a king. You are a representative. A sample of the crownless kin. The detector recognized the progenitor's signature in you. In us, all of humanity. We are their legacy, but we were never meant to be their replacements. June tried to process this. The weight on his shoulders felt different now. It was not the weight of a crown, but the weight of an entire species' hidden history. He was a symbol of something much bigger than himself. This changes nothing for the great houses, Prince Deho said from the door. To them you are still a human who claimed their throne. They will demand a trial by ancestry. A trial? June asked. It is an ancient challenge, Deho explained. To prove your worth, you must pass tests that require a connection to the progenitors. You must activate their old machines, navigate their ruins. No one has passed it in centuries. It is how they will get rid of you without breaking the law. They will ask you to renounce your claim or face the trial. If you choose the trial, you will likely die. If you renounce it, they will call you a liar and a blasphemer and punish you anyway. Yuna looked at June, her face full of worry. What will you do? June looked out the window at the empire he was supposedly meant to rule. He thought about Lord Tyson's threat. He thought about the progenitors and their sleeping song. If there was even a small chance that Yuna was right, then humanity had a place in this galaxy. A real place. If he gave up now, that chance might be lost forever. He turned back to them, a new determination in his eyes. "If they offer me the trial," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I will take it." The news spread across the Empire like a shockwave. The human June had accepted the trial by ancestry. Most saw it as a death sentence. The great houses were pleased. This was the clean, traditional solution they had hoped for. The human would fail, and the embarrassing incident would be over. The trial would consist of 3 tests, each designed to be impossible for anyone without a deep, inherent connection to the progenitors. The first test would take place in the caverns of memory on the dead moon of Erie. The second test was at the Silent Sentinel, a giant progenitor war machine that had stood motionless for 1,000 years. The final test was kept secret, as was the custom. The journey to the moon of Erie was broadcast to every corner of the Empire. June traveled in a small ship with Chancellor Kale and a guard detail. Yuna and Prince Deho followed in a separate vessel, watching from a distance. June felt a strange calm. The decision was made. There was no turning back. The caverns of memory were not made of rock. They were made of a smooth black material that seemed to swallow light. The entrance was a simple archway leading into darkness. The challenge was to navigate the labyrinth inside and find the crystal of recall at its heart. The caverns were impossible to map. Compasses did not work. Lights failed. The only way to navigate was to feel the psychic echoes of the progenitors that were said to still linger in the walls. Lord Tayson and other nobles watched from a safe platform near the entrance. A smirk was on Tayson's face. He expected the human to get lost in the first 5 minutes. June stood at the entrance. He took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The moment he passed through the archway, the world changed. The sounds from outside vanished. The air grew cold. His own breathing was the loudest thing he could hear. He pulled out a light, but its beam only reached a few feet before being consumed by the blackness. He started walking, choosing a direction at random. He tried to feel for something, anything, but he felt nothing. He was just a man walking in the dark. After what felt like an hour, he was completely lost. Panic began to creep into his chest. This was hopeless. He stopped and leaned against the cool, smooth wall. He closed his eyes, trying to calm his racing heart. He thought of Yuna's words. The sleeping song. He wasn't trying to force a connection. He was just trying to listen, and then he felt something. It wasn't a sound or a vision. It was a feeling. A faint sense of warmth from his left. It was like a memory of a sunny day, so distant he could barely feel it. It felt familiar. Not in a way he could explain, but in a way his body understood. It felt like home. He opened his eyes and started walking toward the feeling. The warmth grew slightly. He let it guide him, turning when it shifted, stopping when it faded. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was just following a feeling. The dark corridors seemed to make sense now, not to his mind, but to his spirit. Outside, the nobles grew restless. An hour had passed, then 2. Most contenders emerged, defeated within the first hour. "He is lost forever," Lord Tayson declared with satisfaction. But Chancellor Kale said nothing. He watched the entrance, his expression unreadable. Inside, June turned a corner and saw a soft blue light. In the center of a small chamber sat the crystal of recall, floating in the air and pulsing gently. He had found it. He walked forward and, without thinking, placed his hand on it. The crystal flared with a brilliant white light that lit up the entire cavern system for a single second. When June walked out of the cavern, squinting in the daylight, the watching crowd was silent. They had seen the light flash from within. He had passed the first test. Lord Tayson's smirk was gone, replaced by a scowl of disbelief. The next test was at the Silent Sentinel. It was a machine the size of a small mountain, shaped like a giant armored figure kneeling on the ground. It had been dormant for centuries. The challenge was simple: awaken it. Many had tried. They had shouted commands, pressed against its metal skin, and poured all their mental energy into it. Nothing had ever happened. June stood before the giant machine. It was made of a metal that looked like old gray stone. Vines and moss grew over its legs. It did not feel like a machine. It felt like a part of the landscape. He saw the control panel on its chest, a smooth surface with no buttons or screens. Others had stood there and willed it to move. He walked up to it and placed his hand on the cold metal. He did not try to command it. He did not try to force his will upon it. Instead, he remembered what Yuna had said about the progenitors being gardeners, creators. He thought about what the machine represented. It was not just a weapon. It was a piece of their legacy. A thing they had made with care and purpose. He focused on that feeling. He thought about the wonder of creation. He thought about the love a maker has for their creation. He let that feeling, a feeling of respect and connection, flow through him. He did not ask the machine to serve him. He acknowledged it as a brother, another creation of the progenitors. For a long moment, nothing happened. The nobles watching from their ships began to laugh. The human was just standing there. Then a deep grinding sound echoed across the valley. It was the sound of stone moving against stone after 1,000 years of silence. Flakes of rust and moss fell from the sentinel's body. A light soft and blue ignited in the visor of its helmet. The giant head slowly turned downward until its gaze fell upon the small human figure at its chest. The sentinel did not stand up. It did not fire weapons. It simply reached out one massive metal hand and laid it gently on the ground next to June, palm up. It was a gesture of peace. A gesture of recognition. The laughter from the nobles stopped. The silence now was one of pure awe. June, his heart full of a strange and powerful emotion, placed his hand on one of the giant metal fingers. The sentinel's lights pulsed once warmly and then faded. The machine returned to its silent, kneeling state. But everyone had seen it. It had awakened for him. June had passed the second test. Back on the observation ship, Lord Tayson slammed his fist against a console. "This is trickery."
"Human trickery!"
he roared. But Chancellor Kale watched the screen, his mind racing. The human was not forcing the technology. He was connecting with it. It was a way of interaction the Eurekans had forgotten. It was not about power. It was about understanding. The first two tests were over. The human, against all odds, had passed. Now only the final secret test remained, and everyone knew it would be the most difficult of all. June's success changed everything. The silent watching galaxy was no longer just shocked. It was confused and for some a little hopeful. A human had done the impossible. He had not just passed the trials. He had done so in a way no one had seen before. He did not command the old technology. He spoke to it. He respected it. This made the great houses very nervous. Lord Tayson was the most nervous of all. He saw his power slipping away. If this human completed the third trial, the unthinkable might happen. The nobles might be forced to accept him. Tayson would not allow that. He called a secret meeting with the other most powerful lords and ladies. They met in a shielded room deep within his personal ship. The human uses tricks, Tayson told them, his voice a low rumble of anger. He does not have true power. He confuses the old machines with his alien mind. But we cannot let this continue. The final trial is a test of spirit. It will be easy for him to fake. We must act before it is too late. What can we do? Asked Lady Sura, her wings fluttering with anxiety. The trials are sacred. To interfere is forbidden. The human is the one who has made a mockery of our traditions. Tayson slammed his fist on the table. I do not suggest we break the law. I suggest we enforce it. The human is an outsider. He has no army. He has no allies except for one scientist and a foolish young prince. If he cannot defend his claim, then he is not a true leader. The others understood his meaning. He was talking about a challenge of force. A test the human could not possibly pass. We will not attack him directly, Tayson explained his plan. That would make him a martyr. We will gather our fleets. We will position them around the capital. We will say we are protecting the empire from the instability his claim has caused. When he fails the final trial, we will be there to ensure a smooth transition of power back to the rightful rulers. To us, it was a threat. A show of overwhelming force. The human would see that he had no real support, no power. He would be so intimidated that he would give up. Or, if he did not, the fleet would be there to remove him. The next day, the warships began to arrive. First came Tayson's fleet, great blocky battleships the color of granite. Then came the ships of his allies, sleek fighters and massive carriers. They took up positions in space around the Eurekan homeworld. The sky, usually filled with peaceful traffic, was now dotted with the hard, angular shapes of war machines. Chancellor Kale watched from his office, his face grim. This was exactly what he had feared. The Empire was tearing itself apart. The tradition of the trials was meant to prevent war. not start one. He went to see June, who was back in the spire of reflection. June stood at the window looking up at the stars that were now blotted out by battleships. "You see the situation," Kale said, his voice tired. "Lord Taysan has mobilized his legion. Others will join him. They will not bow to you regardless of the trial's outcome." "What is the final test?" June asked, not turning from the window. "It is the simplest and the most difficult," Kale replied. "It is called the Gathering. The true heir must prove they can unite the people. They must call and others must answer. In the old days, it meant rallying the armies. Today, it is more symbolic. You must show you have the loyalty of a part of the Empire. Any part." June finally turned to look at him. "And how do I do that? Ask those ships to go away?" He pointed to the fleet in the sky. "In a way, yes," Kale said. "You must summon your supporters. You must have them stand with you here at the capital before the sun sets tomorrow. If no one comes, you fail. And with that fleet in orbit, no one will be foolish enough to come." June felt a heavy weight of despair. He had no supporters. He had no army. He was one man. Later, Yuna and Prince Deho managed to visit him again. Their faces were pale with worry. "This is a trap," Deho said. "Taysan knows you have no one to call. He is using the trial to humiliate you and justify taking power. There must be something we can do," Yuna said, her mind racing. "What about the human delegation?" "They could come." Deho shook his head. "A dozen scientists and diplomats? They would be a symbol, but not a meaningful one. The trial requires a show of force, of commitment. It requires an army or something like it." They fell into a sad silence. The situation seemed hopeless. June had come so far only to be defeated not by a test but by politics and fear. June walked back to the window. He looked down at the vast Irican city, at the millions of people going about their lives. They were not nobles. They were farmers, engineers, artists, teachers. They were the Empire. The progenitors had not built their civilization for the lords and ladies. They had built it for everyone. An idea began to form in his mind. It was a desperate, crazy idea. It was not about force. It was about the other thing. The thing that had worked in the caverns and with the Sentinel. Connection. "The trial doesn't say I have to summon an army," June said slowly, turning to face Yuna and Deho. "It says I have to summon supporters. To unite the people. What are you thinking?" Yuna asked. "I'm thinking about what you discovered, Yuna. The crownless kin. We weren't meant to rule. We were meant to connect, to bring people together." He looked at Deho. "Can you get a message out? Not to the armies, not to the nobles, to the people, to everyone in the Empire. What would the message say?" Deho asked, intrigued. June took a deep breath. "It would be an invitation, not a command. We invite anyone who is curious, anyone who wants to see a different way. We don't ask them to fight. We ask them to come and help build." "Build what?" Yuna asked. "I don't know," June admitted. "A better future. We ask the engineers to bring their tools, the farmers to bring seeds, the doctors to bring medicines. We don't come as conquerors. We come as helpers, as kin." It was the most radical thing either of them had ever heard. It was the opposite of everything the Irican Empire stood for. Prince Deho smiled. It was a wide, genuine smile. It is so strange it might actually work. Using Deho's access, they sent the message. It went out across the public networks, bypassing the government channels. It was a simple video of June standing in his room. "My name is June," he said. "The detector called me Crownless Kin. I believe that means I am not here to be your emperor. I am here to be your partner. The progenitors did not leave us an empire to control. They left a galaxy to care for. I am here at the capital. If you are curious, if you want to help build something new instead of fighting for the old, come. Bring your skills, not your weapons. Let us meet as family." The message was sent. All they could do was wait. The sun began to set on the day of the gathering. Lord Taysan's fleet blocked the stars. The great plaza before the Ascendancy Hall was empty, save for a few guards. It was a vast space meant for millions, and it was utterly deserted. June, Yuna, and Daiho stood on the steps of the hall, looking out at the emptiness. Chancellor Kale stood nearby, his face a mask of resignation. It was over. The human had failed. Lord Taysan's voice came over a loudspeaker from his ship in orbit. "The gathering is complete. The human has no supporters. The trial is a failure. The Regency Council will now resume control." June's heart sank. He had been a fool to hope. But then Yuna pointed to the sky. "June, look, a single small ship was descending. It was not a warship. It was a simple, boxy transport ship, the kind used for carrying food. It landed clumsily at the edge of the vast plaza. The hatch opened and a single Irikan man stepped out. He was not a soldier. He wore the simple clothes of a mechanic. 'I am Hyun,' he called out, his voice nervous but clear. 'I fix engines. I heard your message. I want to help.' Then another ship came down. Then another. They were not battleships. They were freighters, personal shuttles, and old mining vessels. They landed wherever they could find space in the huge plaza. People poured out. Irikans, yes, but also other species from across the empire. A woman from a water world brought containers of unique algae. A tall being from a desert planet carried a case of geological samples. They were engineers, doctors, farmers, and teachers. They did not come with weapons. They came with tools and ideas. They filled the plaza, a quiet, determined crowd of ordinary people, answering a call not of a king, but of a kinsman. They stood there, looking at June. There were not millions, but there were thousands. And they were enough. The final test was passed. The crownless kin had gathered, and they had brought not war but the promise of something new. The great plaza was no longer empty. It was filled with a quiet, powerful presence. There were no marching soldiers, no banners of war. There were only people. Thousands of them, from dozens of different worlds standing together in the twilight. They looked at June and he looked back at them. He saw mechanics and farmers, scientists and artists. He saw the true strength of the empire, and it was not in its warships. High above, Lord Tayson watched on his view screen. His face was a storm of fury. "This is not an army. This is a mob. A crowd of traitors and fools." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the plaza. A warning shot. Scatter them." On the ground, Chancellor Kale saw the belly of Tayson's flagship glow with a menacing light. He knew what it meant. He stepped forward, his voice amplified across the plaza. "Lord Tayson, hold your fire. This is a sacred gathering. To attack now is to spit on the progenitors themselves." But the light on the ship grew brighter. June saw it too. He felt a cold fear. He had brought these people here. He was responsible for them. He stepped forward past Kale and stood alone on the wide steps. He did not look at Tayson's ship. He looked at the people in the plaza. He began to speak. His voice was not loud, but it was carried by the microphones for all to hear. "You came," he said, and a simple gratitude filled his words. "You heard a call for something different, and you were brave enough to answer. Look around you. You are not soldiers. You are builders. You are healers. You are growers. The progenitors did not build this empire with weapons first. They built it with knowledge, with understanding, with connection. That is what you have brought here today." He pointed towards the sky, not at the battleship, but at the stars beyond it. "The old way is up there. It is fear. It is power held by a few. It is the threat of violence. It is a path that leads only to more fighting." Then he gestured to the crowd. "The new way is here. It is hope. It is shared purpose. It is the power of many working together. That is the sleeping song my friend Yuna discovered. It is not a weapon. It is the simple, powerful idea that we are stronger as kin than as conquerors." He turned now and looked directly at the spot where he knew Tayson was watching. "Lord Tayson, you can fire your weapon. You can scatter this crowd. You can try to rule through fear. But you cannot kill an idea. The idea of the crownless kin is awake now. It is here. If you destroy us, you will only prove that your way has no place for the future." On the bridge of his ship, Tayson listened, his hand clenched into a fist. His weapons officer looked at him. "The shot is ready, my lord." Tayson looked at the screen. He saw the human small and defiant. He saw the crowd of ordinary people standing firm. He saw that they were not afraid. They were inspired. To fire on them would not make him a hero. It would make him a monster who killed unarmed teachers and farmers. It would turn the entire empire against him. The other lords who supported him would flee from such an act. He saw the truth in June's words. He could win this battle, but he would lose the war for the heart of the empire. A low, frustrated growl escaped his throat. "Stand down," he muttered. "My lord?" The officer asked. "Stand down." Tayson roared. The glowing light on the ship's belly faded away. The threat was over. A great sigh of relief passed through the plaza. Then it turned into something else. It was not a cheer of victory but a hum of shared purpose. The people began to talk to each other. An Irican engineer pointed to the engine of a nearby shuttle, offering advice to its owner. A farmer from an agricultural world showed a sample of a drought-resistant seed to a botanist from a desert planet. They were already doing what June had asked. They were building. Chancellor Kale walked to June's side. He looked at the human, truly looked at him for the first time. He did not see an emperor. He saw a leader. He saw the key to a future he had never dared to imagine. "The trials are complete," Kyle said, his voice formal but filled with a new respect. "You have passed them all. The title of true heir is yours by the oldest laws we have." June shook his head. "No, I don't want the throne. The title true heir belongs to the old way. I am the crownless kin. My place is not above anyone." He looked out at the collaborating crowd. "My place is with them." So a new ceremony was held, not in the grand ascendancy hall, but there in the open plaza, under the stars. The crownstone was brought out and placed among the people. June, with Yuna and Chancellor Kale and Prince Deho beside him, spoke to the galaxy. "The empire of the progenitors is over," June declared. "Its time has passed. Today we start something new. We call it the Concord of Kin." He explained that there would be no single emperor. There would be a council with representatives from every world and every species. The Concord would be a place for sharing knowledge, for solving problems together, for helping each other grow. The true heir would not rule. The crownless kin would act as a guide, a tiebreaker, a living reminder of their shared origin and their shared future. It was a government not of power, but of partnership. The news spread. Across the empire, people watched and listened. On many worlds there was celebration. On others, the old nobles grumbled, but without Tyson's leadership, their resistance faded. The sight of the people gathering had been more powerful than any army. In the following days and weeks, the plaza became the heart of the new Concord. Ships came and went, not carrying weapons, but carrying ideas. A team of human engineers worked with Irican architects to design new clean energy systems. Doctors from water worlds shared medical techniques with species from desert planets. June and Yuna walked through the bustling open-air workshops. They were not treated as rulers, but as friends, as family. "You were right," June said to Yuna. "The sleeping song wasn't about one person. It was about all of us. It was about what humanity could bring to the galaxy. Not conquest, but connection." Yuna smiled. "We just had to wake it up." They stopped and looked at the crownstone. It sat in the middle of the activity, no longer on a lonely dais, but surrounded by life. It was no longer a symbol of one person's power. It was a symbol of a family that had finally found each other. The crownless kin had come home, and they had brought a new dawn with them.